Another embarrassing loss for the Bengals, this time on national television on Monday Night Football. Over the last 2 weeks, the Bengals have more penalties than points scored. And the loss on Monday night, afterwards, it felt to me like the end of something. I don't know exactly what it's the end of. I'm not sure exactly how to articulate it, but I'm going to try. Let's get started. Hi, hello, and welcome in to episode number 155 of the Ball Don't Lie podcast. My name is Austin Elmore. Thank you for being here, and I apologize for not getting 2 uploads up last week. Some would say I'm busier than a one-armed wallpaper hanger. The schedule's a little bit weird when the Bengals play on Monday night for me specifically, and the chaos of the Reds making the playoffs and the weekends and all that other stuff. It's not an excuse, but I'm always going to try to get at least one uploaded every single week, and that's what we were able to do last week. We'll see how things go moving forward. We'll see is certainly a way to approach the rest of the Bengals season. You might hear it in my voice. I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm disappointed, I'm sad, and I'm trying to be honest because I've been dealing with the emotions over the last couple of days following another loss, an embarrassing loss, a loss in which it didn't feel like the Bengals were even close to being a contender at all. And I'm trying to figure out, where exactly do we go from here? Is it over? Like, is the season truly over? Is the window closed? Is that window over? Like, is the Zach Taylor era over? Is the Burrow phase or the first phase of the Joe Burrow era over? I don't know. And so sitting with it over the course of the last couple of days, you try to separate what happened in Minnesota and what happened in Denver. And in Minnesota, it's easy to look around and say, okay, the game got away from them, tough place to play, a bunch of turnovers, first game for Jake Browning after Joe Burrow. Okay, whatever. You can talk me into one of those days you're going to get blown out. Then to go and perform the way they did in Denver, which at the beginning of the game, they at least showed a little bit of fight. It looked like they had some life. And then they get a drive in which a big play is taken off the board due to a bad penalty, and then it was a snowball of other penalties, and they totally gave up. It's like they threw in the towel after a couple of things went wrong. It's like they stopped fighting. And I've been a long-time defender of Zach Taylor. I've believed in Zach Taylor. I believe Zach to be a good man. I think he's a good football mind. I think there's something about Zach Taylor that works. And one of the reasons for that has been that no matter how bad things have gotten, no matter what they've looked like, you could never say that the Bengals quit on him. You could never say that there was a lack of effort. You could never say or feel like the Bengals weren't doing everything they could to try to win. I feel like that's changed. The team that I saw towards the end in Minnesota, the team that I saw for a better part of the game, the most part of the game in Denver, they looked to me like a team that had given up, a team that's lost all hope, a team that maybe has stopped listening to the message of their head coach. And as I was sifting through trying to figure out what is it the end of, and I came to a realization that it's the end of the expectation. So when Burrow got here and they went through the 2020 season, you didn't really know what you had, but you felt good about Joe Burrow. Then he gets hurt with that crazy knee injury in Washington. And the franchise is really at a pretty low point because you had gone 2-14. You get Joe. Joe gets hurt. Who knows what's going to happen? 2021 happens, though, and you realize, oh, it is possible with Joe Burrow to get to the Super Bowl. And you see how bad the offensive line was and all these other issues, and you're like, okay, it is possible to win. The Bengals can win. And so you're filled with belief, you're filled with hope, and more than anything, you're filled with expectation. And so you follow up the 21 run to the Super Bowl with a 22 run right back to the AFC Championship game, in which you were basically a drive away from going back to another Super Bowl. And so again, what that does is confirms that 21 wasn't a fluke, that this team is a legitimate contender in the AFC, and the expectation is to win. So the 23 season happens, And while they started off slow again, they had started to hit the rhythm. They had the lead in Baltimore on a Thursday night, and Burrow goes down with the wrist injury. And so even after that, you're wondering, okay, who knows what it's going to look like with Jake Browning, but he took them on a run and they nearly made the playoffs. Again, reinforcing the belief that the Bengals have a winning culture, right? That's what it's supposed to be. And the 24 season happens, and 23 it had the calf injury and then the wrist injury, and you're like, gosh, that was just a crappy year. And then 24 happens, and the defense is unbelievably bad, but Burrow is unbelievably good, and it feels like they're one or two bad plays away from being right back in the playoffs. All this has basically reinforced the idea that the Bengals are here to stay and the Bengals aren't going away. You get into the offseason and they keep Higgins and they keep Chase and they keep Hendrickson, and you're thinking, all right, gearing up for another run, a full year of fully healthy Joe Burrow. You've changed some coaches on the defensive side of the ball. Everything is trending up. Everything on paper looks really good. And then they don't play the games on paper, and Burrow gets hurt, and maybe Burrow getting hurt unveils all these other warts and all these other issues that the team has. But I don't know if I'd really say that, because a lot of those guys are the same guys. The veteran players are gone. The biggest issue with me, specifically with Zach Taylor, is that it doesn't feel like this team is progressing. Nobody on defense really progressed last year. Nobody on defense really has progressed this year. And that is an indicator that what you're doing isn't working. And to me, that falls directly on the head coach. Because you have to get young players, you have to develop them into players that are productive and impactful for your football team. And it doesn't feel like enough players are taking a step forward and progressing so that you can continue the winning. And I don't know how to explain that. Number one, you do have some guys that are getting older. You have some guys that, you know, are dealt with some injuries, like Ted Karras and Orlando Brown Jr. and Logan Wilson and guys like that. And so, and Trey Hendrickson is getting older as well. Like, there is some of that. But really, looking at the roster, it shouldn't be this bad. That's the confusing part. And so the expectations for years had been, okay, the Bengals, as long as Joe Burrow is around, are going to compete in the AFC. They're going to compete for AFC championships. They're going to compete for Super Bowls. And the way things had gone in 23 with Burrow getting hurt, in 24 with the atrociously bad defense and narrowly missing the playoffs, firing Lou Anarumo and getting to this point, and then Burrow getting hurt again, and then getting embarrassed the way that they did in Minnesota and in Denver, to me it was the end of the expectations. For a while, and even dating back to last year, the expectation every time you tuned into the Bengals was, let's see how they're going to win this one today. How are they going to pull this one off? And instead, now the expectation has shifted to, how badly are they going to get beaten? How will they be embarrassed? Much like the lost decade of Bengals football in the 90s when they were the laughingstock of the NFL. How are they going to lose today? The expectation is no longer when the Bengals take the field on Sundays, they have a chance to win. The expectation is they're going to lose. And that's not a good place for any franchise to be. Certainly not with the head coach who's been here for 7 years. Certainly not with the two of the best weapons in the NFL in Chase and Higgins. Certainly not with a Defensive Player of the Year candidate in Trey Hendrickson. It's not supposed to look this bad, even with a backup quarterback, because we've seen it in the past. It's not supposed to look this bad. So where do we go from here? I don't know the answer. I don't know if anybody knows the answer. Part of me says if you go and get a backup quarterback, or you acquire a guy like Russell Wilson, or you acquire a guy like Jameis Winston or Derek Carr, whoever it might be, part of me says it's not going to matter because the offensive line is that bad and the defense is really not taking any steps forward. And on top of it, I don't know that Zach is really the right guy for the job anymore. These years go in phases where there are roster turnovers, there are new coaches, there are all sorts of different things that change over the course of a career. Carson Palmer went through a couple of these when he was here. Andy Dalton went through a couple of these when it was here. Big turnover changes, defensive changes, philosophy changes, coaching changes, all this different stuff, and yet the quarterback and the players, and a lot of times they remain the same. I just don't know where the Bengals are going right now, because it doesn't feel like they're going in the right direction. And the biggest thing that stands in the way of them being competitive or contending in any way, shape, or form this season, to me, is the offensive line. I talked about this in the last episode. They're soft. They're slow. They're not playing well. I mean, hell, Dalton Reisner was benched for Jalen Rivers, a rookie 7th-round pick. And so I'm trying to figure out, okay, how do you fix what is currently the issue? And currently the issue is the offensive line can't protect. The offensive line can't block in the run game. There is no run game whatsoever. There's no balance. And the teams are just able to easily tee off on the Bengals. And so earlier this week, prior to Monday Night Football, I got the chance to interview Troy Aikman, the Hall of Fame quarterback, formerly of the Dallas Cowboys, and now the lead Monday Night Football game analyst for ESPN. And I was asking him about running the football, about the Bengals offensive line, how this can be fixed. Take a listen to what Troy said.
It's got to be an organizational commitment to do that. And then when I've looked at Cincinnati over the years, when we've had them for a lot of these games, they haven't necessarily tried to run the football. They haven't done a lot to take some of the pressure off of the offensive line and the quarterback as well. And what I mean by that is, they're towards the bottom of the league and have been for a number of years in play action. They have been in screen passes. They don't run the football. It's really basically Joe Burrow in drop back passing game. And when you have Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Chase Brown as a guy who can come out of the backfield, and Gesicki and Yosavash, and I get all the things that they have, but I just think that from my experience and the success that I had in this league, it sure helps if you're able to run the football efficiently, and they've had a hard time doing that. They haven't had, as you well know, they haven't had much of a running game. Mm-hmm. In the last 5-6 years. So it becomes then a real challenge across the board for everybody. I don't know how much I do like I like Zach Taylor. I know he's a really good offensive mind. Unfortunately for them, some of the things that kind of show itself from time to time is in that offensive front, and they've addressed it. They just haven't been able to clean it up for a variety of reasons.
The two words at the beginning are what stick out to me the most. Organizational commitment. There has to be an organizational commitment to the philosophy of here is what we are going to be up front. We're going to be tough. We're going to be nasty. We're going to be strong. And even though we have great wide receivers and weapons on the outside, we're going to be able to run the football down your throat. We're going to be physical. We're going to get down in a three-point stance. We're going to build our team and our run game around our mentality, which is to break your will and to control you. And it's an organizational commitment, from Zach Taylor and the scheme, to the offensive line coach and what they're taught, to the players and the way that they execute, all the way up to player personnel, Duke Tobin and Mike Brown and those guys, to get those type of players that are nasty, mean, strong humans that set a tone in the way that they block, both in the pass game and in the run game. Right now, there feels like a disconnect between the offense that they're trying to run and the players that they have. And part of that is probably because Joe Burrow isn't here. And Joe Burrow, with his offense, you spread it out. You throw the ball a lot more than you would otherwise. And so, to me, those two things are not cohesive, and that spells disaster. And I kind of feel like that's where we're at right now when it comes to the Bengals offense. And the other thing, too, is the idea with an organizational commitment, it also comes down to taking the attitude or being a reflection of the attitude or the character or the identity of your head coach. If I were to ask you, what is the Bengals' identity? You might say some swagger, throwing the ball, Joey B, Joe Burr. That's the identity of the Bengals. I don't know that that's always a good thing. Like, yeah, the identity of the entire organization basically is Joe Burrow. But again, those two things aren't married because the view of the Bengals is kind of outdated and stubborn and stuck in their ways and cheap and blah 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 blah. And that kind of all goes against what Joe Burrow is or who Joe Burrow is. And I think he determines the mentality or the attitude or the character or the identity of the football team more than just about anyone else. I think that's an issue. I think there needs to be more reflection of the head coach. I think of a team like Detroit, for example, who's about to come in here for a game on Sunday. They are the reflection of Dan Campbell. They are aggressive, they are physical, they are smart, they are tough, and they are fearless. And they ride or die with their head coach. Now, you can make the argument that they don't have a superstar quarterback, that they have a collection of really good players, but nobody that's a true bona fide superstar, and the Bengals might have two of them in Burrow and Chase and maybe even Higgins. But the organization is aligned with the identity that Dan Campbell is trying to build. Actually, Zach Taylor was asked about that this week, was asked about Dan Campbell and coming up with him and his memories of Dan. And take a listen to what Zach had to say.
Got a lot of respect for him. He's done an unbelievable job. I do reflect back on in 2021 when we went up there his first year. I don't think they'd won a game yet. I could be wrong. Maybe they'd won one. I don't think they'd won any. Knowing what they were building, you could tell they played with a lot of undrafted free agents on defense, and you could just tell they had the identity of their coaching staff, their head coach, the way that they played. And they might not have had all the talent in the world then, and we got the best of them that day, but you could see something that was building in the future, whether people believed it at the time or not. It was very clear. And so now you're here in 2025, and they've had the success they've had over the years. They have the success they've had this year, winning 3 in a row. It's a really good football team. I love personally playing these types of games. These are my favorite games to play. This is why we do it. Again, our back's up against the wall a little bit going in this game off of 2 losses. That's perfect. I like to see how everybody responds, who lives in fear, who thrives in adversity. It's a great opportunity for a coach to really assess what guys are made of, myself included. And so again, it's a tremendous opportunity that we are not running from, we are running directly into.
The reflection of their head coach. If I were to ask you right now, if you're talking about the Bengals, what's the reflection of Zach Taylor? Right now, people say he's in over his head. They say he's clueless. They say he's a bad play caller. They say he's a guy who isn't that aggressive, smart, tough, dependable type of coach. I would just say that Zach's personality is calm, controlled, collected, and confident. And I think that's even Joe's personality as well. So in a way, those two things being married together and those two things, working together, I think is a good thing. And that might be part of why it works between Joe and Zach when Joe's healthy. But is that the reflection of the rest of the organization? Is that the reflection of the defense? Is that the reflection of your offensive line? And is that a reflection that you want? Because I don't know that the personality of Zach Taylor is necessarily the reflection that or the team reflecting that personality. I don't know if that's necessarily what I want. I think back to, this season, guys left. Von Bell, Mike Hilton, Sam Hubbard, veteran guys that have been around and been a part of this organization through all different types of scenarios and seasons and whatnot. Those guys that maybe police the locker room or set the expectation or set the tone. And I'm wondering, is there somebody in the locker room to do that now? Trey Hendrickson said he wanted to be a leader. He wanted to be a captain. Jamar Chase, is he that? Is he setting the standard? Can Joe do it while he's injured? Can the offensive linemen like Ted Karras and Orlando Brown Jr. do it while they play extremely poorly? I don't know. It feels, again, like a disconnect between the two. And also on top of that, I don't think the organization in and of itself carries any sort of mindset other than this is just how we do things. And so it feels like the swagger and the confidence and the expectation has kind of been lost. And I don't know how to get it back. I don't know if they know how to get it back. And when things go south, like they do with a couple of penalties, it feels like the Bengals throw in the towel. That's not at all who or what you want to be. Joe Burrow spoke, sort of, for the first time since getting injured. He posted an Instagram post, said, "See you soon." And when I was talking to Troy Aikman, Aikman has voiced his fanhood, I guess, his appreciation, how much he loves Joe Burrow over and over again over the years as the voice of Monday Night Football. And so I asked Aikman to take off his analyst hat and to put on his human being and quarterback hat and ask him what advice he would give, because Troy went through a lot of injuries himself towards the end of his career. I asked him what advice would he give to Joe Burrow.
Oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. And quite honestly, Austin, I don't know. I don't know that I'd have any advice that would be worthwhile for him. And I say that because he's been through this, and it's not like the first time he's had to deal with an injury like this and miss significant time. And that's the part of it, as I mentioned earlier on this call, that I'm such a big fan of his. He's my favorite quarterback in the NFL because of the way he plays. I think he's very old school. He plays the game the way that the quarterbacks of my generation, really, for the most part, had to play it. You had to play from within the pocket, and there had to be some semblance of timing and, all of that. So I've always enjoyed watching him play. I've marveled at some of the things that he's been able to do under a lot of pressure. And so I hate that a great career continues to get derailed because of the injuries that he's endured. And that was what was so disappointing for me, for him, and for Cincinnati fans and the organization, that last year he stays healthy. If I'd had a vote the MVP, I would have given him my vote. That's how good I thought he was. And yet they failed to make the playoffs and take advantage of a healthy Joe Burrow who played like an MVP. And to me, if I'm in that organization, that's hard to swallow. But
sure.
For Joe, I just think that he'll go through the rehab. He'll get ready to go, and maybe we'll see him at the end of the year. I don't know. I think that's probably optimistic, but hopefully then going forward he can stay healthy and play for a long time. But yeah, it's a tough deal when the team continues to move on, and then you just have to sit and watch and hope for the best.
Hearing you talk about him in the past, I've gotten the vibe that you see a lot of yourself in him. Is that fair to say?
A little bit. I was going to say I know that the way that he plays is the way I had to play, and I think that when I see quarterbacks like him, that it is something that I kind of gravitate towards, and so there's no doubt about that. But in addition to just the way that he plays, I think it's his whole demeanor. He's got a cool factor that I didn't have and I don't have. As far as how he relates to everybody, he just kind of he's got a way about him, as you know, and I just think that his mentality when he's on the field, I just think he's an assassin. And I've said that before in our broadcast. I just, he's got this killer instinct, and he's so competitive and plays at such a high level. To me, at everything that he does, I just have enjoyed when he's answered questions at difficult moments after tough losses. I just think the way that he's represented himself and the organization, I don't know what more he could do.
Great stuff there from Troy Aikman. I'm not sure. I don't think I'm going to be able to get another podcast recorded and up by the time the Bengals play the Lions on Sunday. So I'll do a brief preview now. Detroit's really freaking good. Cincinnati is not. And like I said, the expectation has shifted. The expectation now is that Detroit's going to come in here and embarrass Cincinnati again. It's a 4:25 p.m. kickoff. Zach Taylor did say this week he feels better about Shamar Stewart possibly playing this week, which would be a big lift to the Bengals defense. The Lions do have some injuries, and they have a couple of injuries in their secondary, but they're still one of the best defenses in the NFL with Aiden Hutchinson on their edge. They're one of the best defenses in the NFL, both against the pass and against the run. And offensively, they still run the football. They go under center. They hand it off to to David Montgomery and to Jahmyr Gibbs. They have a lot of play action. Amon-Ra St. Brown is as good a receiver as there is in the NFL. You've got the deep threat in Jamison Williams. Jared Goff appears to have found his swagger. So the Lions come in here a lot more confident than they were after week number 1, and they look a lot like the old Lions. Again, a reflection of Dan Campbell. So I think it's going to be another ugly one for the Bengals. The question then becomes, if it's going to be that ugly, how are you going to change? What are you going to fix? And where do we go from here? Because this thing could unravel quickly, because after Detroit, it's Green Bay, and then it's Pittsburgh, and then who knows after that where this team stands. Can they fix it? Can they nip it in the bud now? Can they get back to that mentality, that swagger, that belief, that hope, and that effort that we've seen when things go south in the past? We'll find out on Sunday if they fight at all. Thank you so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, you can hear me weekdays from noon to 3 on ESPN 1530. I co-host a show there called Cincy 360 with Tony Pike. You can also hear me weekends occasionally on 700 WLW. You can follow me anywhere on social media at Auty Elmore, AUTYELMORE. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Ball Don't Lie podcast. And as always, have fun, be safe, go Bucks.